we are going to take a look at optical art or op art. And what we're going to be looking at and creating is what I like to call kind of worm tunnels or wormholes. So the first thing, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do this, is you are going to create a line across your page. So I'm just going to put a quick line and then give it a little curve to it. You just don't want your curve to kind of cut back across the line. So you want it to be a nice smooth curve. And then I'm going to put about 5 dots. Now I want to put the dots pretty close to the line, but off the line so I can actually see it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next step is you want to think about a bouncing ball is the way I've always kind of thought about when I create these lines is I want to start off the page and then the ball is going to bounce and it's going to hit that dot and then it would bounce and hit that dot and then it can be different sizes as it sort of bounces, so it might be sort of bigger or smaller closer to the line as you sort of go, and I'm going to let that one go off the page as well. So that is the first set that I'm going to create. Now I'm going to continue on this same side. I'll work both sides of the page eventually, but I'm going to stay with this top part. Now when I create my lines for this project, the further apart they are, the closer they are together, starts to create some visual illusion with the eye. So I'm going to do the same thing, but when I touch here, I want to continue to always touch back to where my dot was. So I want to bounce back into that kind of crevice between those two lines. And then again, I'm going to go back in between that line and in between and in between and in between and then off to the edge of the paper. Now I'm going to focus on just one. So I'm going to stick right here and I'm going to create concentric circles that continue to come back into my original area where my dot was. When you're doing this, you do not want to make it look like a rainbow. So you don't want, when you have your lines, you don't want them to come and touch your original line like that. That's not going to work to create that optical illusion. So you want to avoid making any rainbows. So this is starting to get a little big. I'm going to move to the one right next to it. And again, I'm going to start moving so that I am creating those lines that go back into this little area, this little crevice where my original dot was. And I can make them a little wider and go off into the space. And then I'm going to bounce over to this one so it doesn't get squeezed out. And a Sharpie or a black marker is a great tool for this, but if you have a black colored pencil or crayon, if that's what you have, that's okay too. And then I'm going to continue to build those curved lines. And you want your curved lines going up from your original line. So you're going to continue to fill that in. And again, all the way back to your original. And eventually it's going to get taller and you're not going to be able to touch all the way here, but you always want to go back to that original kind of V in between. So if it was creating a line, it always goes back into that spot. So I've started to create all of these tunnels on one side, and then I'm going to flip it over. I always try to have a piece of paper under my workspace so that way if I go off the edge, I'm not creating any lines on my table or anything like that. So now the other side, I'm going to go back again and I'm going to do the bouncing ball to those dots that I originally started. Go all the way across the page and then go off. And then the same idea, you don't want to crowd one way or the other, but you want to continue to build up those tunnels. Going back to that original dot or that original indent without crowding any of the other out. And sometimes they'll get pretty small and sometimes they'll get big, and that's okay. You just don't want to lose it completely. When you're finished, you will have these moving tunnels that kind of make your eye move all over the paper. Another fun option for the worm tunnels, other than them going from top to the bottom of the page, is to make them go to the center of the page. So this time, instead of one line going all the way across, we are going to create an X, but again, keep it kind of a flowy line. So I'm going to do an X first, and then I'm going to divide that space up again with another 2 lines. And you want to make sure that they merge at the center. So you want to make sure all of your lines overlap right at the center. And then you're going to do a very similar movement with your lines. So you're going to start in the center, but you're going to kind of keep it almost like a teardrop where you're going back into that little crevice between the lines. But this time you're going to fill the space between the lines. So I'm going to continue to make sure I'm going between the space. And this time, these lines have sort of created my crevice for me. So I'm going to continue to build this one up. And then I can bounce around the page and fill. And again, they're sort of teardrop shapes, not in between. You don't want them to go like this, where it's sort of creating that rainbow. You want to make sure that they always cut back into the space between the line you created and the curved. So no rainbows. That's not going to create that optical illusion for you. So I'm going to go back in here and continue to make my lines closer together, further apart, and fill those kind of triangles that I made with my curving lines. So then once you're done, it creates a different type of worm tunnel that all merge into the center here. So there's a couple of different options, either the one that kind of radiates out from the center or the worm tunnels that go vertical or depending on if you did your page, they can be going horizontally across the page as well. So lots of different options for you to get a chance to play around with. The next thing we're going to do is add color. Once you have your project finished, you're going to add color. Now I picked 3 colors, sort of cool colors that I'm going to play around with, and you can do each worm tunnel a solid color where you're doing this one all green, this one all blue. I like to mix it up where I bounce a little bit between the 2 or 3 colors that I'm using, just to give a little more variation in my project. But once you start to add color, each of your curved spaces, you want to add a small value scale. So from the center, this area here is going to be my lightest spot, and then I'm going to lightly fill to the edge, going in both directions a little mini value scale that we've kind of played around with other projects. So it's going to stay white in the center. And then towards the edge, I'm going to start to make it darker so you start to see the value for each of the spaces that I'm going to be filling. So darker towards the edge and then light to white in the center. So you have that highlight in the center. I'm going to switch over to this kind of violet color, magenta violet. And then again, I'm going to leave close to where my highlight is in the center and then slowly create that value scale on both sides, being fairly light in the middle and then slowly going darker towards the edges. And that's going to create another level of movement and start to make these look like they're curved even more than they are. And then I'm going to make this a pattern with blue and that magenta color. And again, you want your highlight, that white area, to continue to follow up the middle of your worm tunnel. So I'm going to fill this one in, and I'm going to continue to do the same thing all over my paper and create that value scale in each of the sections.